just like family, thinking of you. Top-notch agents always say can do. Life is good here.
Hi, it's Rob the Realtor, and today I'm here with Mark Kamada from Frontier Construction, and he's going to go over what it takes to become a licensed contractor, as well as take us through the home building process. So Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to become a licensed contractor?
I started going to work with my dad when I was young. He was a contractor, and just really enjoyed working with my hands. And they say if you the old adage, if you do what you like to do, you never work a day in your life.
So Mark, when you're looking at a potential investment, what types of things do you look into?
Well, the first thing that's probably the most important is the zoning, what you can do with the property. And then obviously access to the property is very important. And the grade of the property could determine the cost of what you're building. If you're building on a heavy grade, then it's going to cost you a lot more and be a lot more work. Whereas if you have a nice flat level lot, things go a lot smoother and a lot easier. Mm-hmm. So you're required to have a 10-foot side yard. All that means is you have to have 10 foot to the side yard to the property line.
Now, is it 20 feet from the edge of the road or from the middle of the road?
There's a little gray area in there. They say 45 feet from the center of the road or 20 feet from the side, whatever is greater. When we built the house across the street, we went from the center of the road, then you have no questions, because once the foundation's in the ground, can't move it. So it has to be right. Which is very important. A lot of people will have, if you don't have your markers and your boundary points, you can hire a surveyor to find these points, because if you're on somebody else's land and they come along, you might have to move it, which would be very costly. Yeah.
Well, next we're going to talk about from building from the ground up and all the different aspects of the structure itself. All right, so here we are on the outside of the structure. Mark's going to show us from the ground up where we start with the construction process.
This particular building has a garage down low, so we have a footing in the ground, and the footing is determined as big. It's 12 by 18 because we have a 2-story building, and then it comes out of the ground and we have an 8-inch stem wall. There's rebar.
All right, so here we are inside the garage. Mark's going to kind of show us from the stem wall and around the stem wall, foundation. He's the expert. I'm going to let him explain everything to us. So what do we got here, Mark?
Well, this is actually the stem wall. It's 8 inches wide. We're required to have a foundation bolt every 6 feet, and these are bearing plate washers, which are also required. A lot of foundations will have HD hold downs, different sizes. This is an HD2, and what it is, it stops a building from racking back and forth and moving. So also here we have foundation vents. We're in a flood zone, so we have to have more vents than average. They want the water to be able to come in and come out gracefully. And then we have our basic framing, 16 inches on center. This building is 2 by 6 walls. Some are 2 by 4 walls. This is our shear underneath our siding, which again creates that strength for not racking. The front walls over here, we have strong walls because they're so small in the front. They make a special wall made of steel that you buy pre-made. Okay, here we have a big 5 1/4 by 18 glue lamp beam. This is going through the middle of the building, and it's supporting all the quiet floor joists, which is supporting the plywood above. This supports most of the middle of the floor. We have an entry door back here. You have to have a 36-inch entry on a building, and then you have to have a way out the back too for fire. This building also is built up against the hillside, so the part of the stem wall back here is also a retaining wall, retaining the dirt. Behind here, the dirt's yay high on the wall, and there's a French drain, which is just a tube with a bunch of holes in it, and water can run around it so it doesn't come through the wall. And the wall was also waterproofed on the outside. The slab is a little different too. You pour the foundation, then the inside slab here has a rebar in it, and the rebar in this particular slab is 3/8, and it's a 16-inch grid with red sand and a moisture-proof membrane. The moisture-proof membrane keeps any moisture coming out of the earth up into here.
So tell me about this big thing over the doorway. What's that called, and why is that such a large piece of wood?
This is called a header or a lintel. It's a 2x6, and because we don't have any studs here in this doorway, this is taking the strength of the weight pushing down and transfer it to these. These are called trimmers, and these are the king studs behind it. And this is how you build doorways and windows. Pressure treated lumber has been, in the old days they'd soak it in creosote. Insects don't want to come into it, and it seems to hold up a lot better in the weather.
So what is that board on top of the stem wall called again?
This is a mud sill.
Mud sill.
Yeah. This is actually where the concrete and the wood are connected together. As I said earlier, every 6 feet there's a 5/8 foundation bolt, 5/8 by 12. It's a J hook. It has a J on the bottom of it.
Okay.
And this is what's holding this to this.
Gotcha. So what are these vertical 2x6 boards called, and why? Do they have to be a certain width apart?
Yeah, there's 16 inches on center. We do 16 inches on center, so, well, that's required by the building department, but it lays out properly, so your sheeting, your plywood, and your drywall, everything works out properly.
Because all those types of sheets come in 8-foot wide sections?
Correct.
Gotcha. So with the exterior walls, do you frame those all together and then put the whole wall up, or can you start at the mud sill and then add your studs and then put the exterior wall on from there? Or could you do it either way?
You can do it either way. In this particular application, like the back wall, there was no way to, if you frame the whole thing, then you'd have to try to lift it up to this wall, and it would be impossible. So in this application, this wall was built in place, and because of the height and size, these are all built in place.
Now with the vents down here, I've seen on houses where they have a crawl space underneath the house, there's venting. And from what home inspectors have told me, you need to have a certain amount of venting for a certain amount of square footage of the home itself.
For every 150 square foot of the home, you have to have a foundation vent.
Okay.
Yeah, and flood vent rules are a little different. On flood vents, for every square foot, you have to have an inch of flood vent. And then also you have to have access underneath the house, which is a bigger vent. It's 24 by 30 to crawl in. And then you also have to have that crawl space within 20 feet of the plumbing. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll put one at each end of the house and one on the other side. So whoever has to come and work on it, you know, they're appreciative of that. Or if you have to make a repair and drag stuff underneath. So it's good to have access.
Yeah, I'm selling a house right now, and they have the access is over on one corner of the house, and they've said that when you go in the sub area, there's a wall. They have to climb up over a wall and then climb up over another wall to get to the back corner of the sub area, because it's built on the side of a hill.
I've been in those situations, and we've actually gone around the other side and cut in a new crawl space just because we're going to save hours and days of labor.
Right.
And the reason we have crawl spaces, if you close off a house and you don't have air circulating under the house, the mold and the mildew will start, and you have to have fresh air. Without the fresh air, we have dry rot and all kinds of things go on. Siding. And underneath the siding, we have a thing called a moisture-proof membrane also, which is Tyvek. It allows the air to the house to breathe out, but no water to come in, which is very interesting.
All right, so here we are upstairs. I want you to explain kind of what we got going on here.
Well, here we have pre-manufactured trusses. All that means is we went to a guy with our plan, and he made each truss, which I think there's 13 here, in a factory, and he came out here with a crane and set them on top of the roof. And rolling the trusses, he has them laying down, and we stand one up at a time, and now we have trusses. The building department also has a required, you have to have so much pitch. Any less than 2 and 12 can't be a shingle, because the water would run back underneath the shingle.
When you say 4 and 12, is that 12 inches of width by 4 inches of height, or vice versa?
You go, if you went 4 feet out, you'd go 1 foot down.
Okay.
If you went 8 foot out, it'd go 2 foot down.
Okay.
So that's 4 and 12. It's pretty common. A lot of residential properties are 4 and 12. It's easier to shingle. It's easier to work on. Here again, we do have vents around the top and gable vents for our fresh air. As we talked about earlier, if you don't have fresh air and you lock it out, we create a mold and mildew and rotting problem. Up here also we have a pocket door here, which I put in because this is a 1-bedroom apartment and there wasn't a lot of room. Yeah, the door will actually slide back in the wall because I have one door swinging here and another swinging here. I thought if I could take one out of the equation, it'd be nice. And being a 1-bedroom, there's probably going to be one person here, and this will probably be open all the time. All bathtubs are 5 feet, so most bathrooms are 5 feet wide. And the bathtub is it's 30 inches wide and 5 foot long. So a lot of bathrooms, like I said, are 5 feet. Then the toilet, to be legal, has to be 30 inches in the clear. That means the toilet space has to be 30 inches with nothing next to it. And then the Pullman is usually 24 inches. I say Pullman, but I mean sink. In the old days, we called them Pullmans. So you actually need like 7.5 feet to have a legal bathroom all the way across. All right, so here we are. We talked about the 2x4 or 2x6 wall width. And with the different width, with the wider width, you can put more insulation on the wall. You can go R19, which is called the R factor. When you build a house, you have a heat loss specs. And then another thing we didn't talk about was electric. Most electric is just run through Romex, through the walls. You have a plug within every 12 feet. You have to have something to plug into all the way around the bottoms. The electric, anything near water has to be ground fault interrupted, meaning if the electric went to the water, it would not shock you. It'd shut off in 1/1000th of a second or something, which is another safety device. Most houses have a 200 amp panel, and the water is, and the electricity is just kind of moved around. Just if you can imagine extension cords, it's just all in the walls like that in boxes. It's not very hard to figure out. So many breakers. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of breakers in the kitchen because like a refrigerator has to be on one circuit. The stove has to be on one circuit. The countertops have to be on another circuit. And now that we have a microwave, we got to have that on a circuit. The garbage disposal, dishwasher, I mentioned that. There's like 7 circuits just in the kitchen. The light.
You talked about GCFI outlets. So yeah, if you got a hairdryer next to your bathroom sink and the hairdryer drops in the sink full of water, it trips that circuit. But how many of those GCFI outlets do you have to have on, if everything in that kitchen or bathroom's on a circuit? Do you just need to have one GCFI, or do you have to have each outlet has to be GCFI on the same circuit?
They make them so there's on the plug it says line and load. The coming in, everything if you put the electric coming in the GFI and then you run everything beyond it, this GFI here will protect everything behind you.
Just like family, thinking of you. Top-notch agents,